Okay, hopefully you can see my slides. So the title of my presentation is Eco-Friendly Building and Green Architecture, Making the Connection with Ethical Practices in Construction. So a little bit about myself. I'm Associate Professor in Construction Management at the University of Leeds in the UK, and I do a variety of work there. Teaching and research. And on this slide are some of my research interests around digitization and social technical systems and health and safety in the workplace. So this paper is really connecting with Sustainable Development Goals number 11 and 12, and also goal number 8, which is decent work and economic growth. So what this paper presents is data from a survey of UK construction leaders that I did in spring last year, 2024. And I did a series of interviews and a survey to ask about ethical practices in construction. Part of the findings from that survey was that sustainability is linked to ethical or unethical practices on construction and building projects. So what was identified through the data was some unethical practices in both the design and the construction phase of a project. And both company and individual worker actions can contribute to the achievement of sustainability on projects. So what this paper does, if you wish to read it, is it does detail some of the unethical practices that do happen on construction and building projects. And it also suggests some practical solutions to these problems. And what comes out from this paper is that the achievement of sustainability and sustainable projects can be linked to ethical behaviors and practices. So the motivation and background for this paper is around ethics and ethical behaviors in the construction industry. So ethical behaviors have been recognized as important on projects for quite a long time, as some references there on the slide. But the connection with sustainability remains quite underexplored. So as I said, last year, I did a very small research project with a number of construction leaders to examine ethical practices in the industry. And findings of this survey actually brought through the sustainable issues. So what we can say here is the achievement of a sustainable project can be compromised by ethical practices. So the driving questions I have here are how to understand the link and the relationship between ethical practices and sustainability on projects. And moreover, what more research work can be done in this area. So this is very much a conference paper, and it's just an initial part of maybe a larger research project into this subject. So from the initial survey last year, there was only 12 respondents, which is quite a small number, but still everybody had important opinions to share, and they're all leaders in the profession. So everyone's opinions and thoughts on this subject are important to capture, and I brought them together in the form of this very short conference paper. So some of the findings from this project on this slide here are some common ethical problems in construction industry. Things like bribery and corruption can happen, unfair payment processes. And as you can see here on the slide, I'm not going to read through them all, but there are a lot of issues there that can happen, which we can talk about and identify as unethical. And therefore, we should really look at how to solve them and how to address them. The question here was, what are the most important ethical problems in the construction industry today? And these were the ones that were identified. A number of questions specifically identified sustainability. So deceiving clients by hiding mistakes or poor quality work, substituting products with substitutes which are not as good, substandard materials, for example. And as you can see from this finding on this slide, these kind of issues can be quite prevalent and quite common in the industry. Procurement issues around deception or unfairness in the procurement process, price fixing as well, can come through quite often and can be linked to the achievement of sustainability, whatever materials are being chosen, whatever design, and then materials follow in the project process. Poor environmental practices like illicit dumping of construction waste can happen a lot on projects. So this is something we have to recognise as well. So some of the key issues here that came through was the use of poor quality materials which are cheaper but don't comply with specifications, the use of alternative products, for example, that don't have certificates of quality, specifications themselves which are not fit for purpose due to lack of training. For example, here, paint corrosion protection paint system, which does not adequately address the exposure elements in the environment. Poor quality construction can often result from methods just to get things done quickly and easily. And these kind of things will have an effect on a sustainable project and the overall outcome. For example, here, the curing time for concrete can be compromised in parts of the world. Negligence of known construction methods and procedures, and attitudes which do not strive towards quality. And of course, prioritizing cost over safety. So from the survey, we did get some solutions to these problems on this slide. So often companies do have procedures to identify and address these issues, for example, codes of practice, education of employees through training courses or on-site training. Sometimes the companies have strict compliance processes, sometimes they're less strict, and sometimes companies can even use external agencies for training construction workers on ethical practices. And the paper itself, if you want to read it, has a bit more detail here on the solutions that can be used by industry to tackle unethical practices. Some further comments here from the leaders I interviewed. Ethical behaviours are quite difficult to pin down because they're not like a quality assurance or a financial process. They are all to do with an individual behaviour and an individual's belief system, how they behave and how they think about the project itself. There were some comments around sustainability certifications like BREEAM, and the word greenwashing was used a few times because targets are seen to be unachievable. And some interesting comments about how to solve this whole issue of ethical practices in construction. It really needs to come from the top, the management level, and it should be driven by governments as well, if possible. Obviously, if it's a government project and government is the client, then they have to push it through. So this is an interesting comment that the leadership of a project really has to talk about ethical behaviours and solving the problems. So to keep it quite brief, this presentation, we can say that unethical practices in construction are a fact of life, unfortunately, and they can be linked to achievement of sustainability on projects through a variety of things happening. I think this area of research is kind of emerging, and there is opportunities to do more interesting work. So the insights of this paper highlight the importance of establishing an ethical business culture within organizations and on projects themselves. There needs to be a clear message. Implementing necessary policies and practices to address bad behaviors is very important in order to try to tackle this issue. And this paper concludes by saying unethical practices, which do link to the UN SDG goals 8, 11 and 12. Unethical practices do have an impact on sustainability and the achievement of sustainability on projects, and this should be acknowledged and addressed. So if you choose to read this paper, I'm very interested in anybody who wants to collaborate further on this in terms of theories or concepts to take this work forward. I think this is just the first step in maybe a larger research project on ethical practices and sustainability. So thank you very much for your attention. And if anyone has any questions or discussions, that'd be great. Here's my email if anyone wants to email me later. Thank you very much for your attention.